Hey, Dr. C here. Hope you're having a nice day. Today we're going to talk about the gut bacteria. And we're going to talk about pre and probiotics. So first we're just going to talk about the bacteria, the microorganisms that occupy our body. And now more specifically in the gut. You'll hear the term microbiome. A microbiome is used mostly by the researchers, and that deals mostly with the genetic makeup of these basic microorganisms, the genetic makeup. When you hear the term microbiota, they're talking about the specific microorganisms that are in your body. So they may refer to the gut microbiota, which we're going to today. Now in our body we have about 100 trillion of these microorganisms in the body. That is the equivalent of 3 full pounds of poop. 3 pounds. Fair amount. You don't want to get rid of them. You can live without them, not comfortably, but you can live without them, but you need them. Now we classify all of these organisms that are in our body, or bacteria in general. We classify them according to the laboratories that we use to identify them, etc. We identify them in the bacteria now in the laboratory. We identify them as having specific characteristics. Some of them can live in oxygen, and they're called aerobic bacteria. Some of them require no oxygen. They are called anaerobic microorganisms, anaerobic bacteria. We also classify them in how they react to a gram stain. So that way you can look at them under the microscope. You put the material on which colors them, and they can be either gram positive, they took up the stain, or gram negative. So now you have 4 different varieties: gram positive, gram negative, aerobic, anaerobic. Okay, so that's how one of the ways we do it medically. There are other ways of classifying them. The biologists classify them according to their categories. So it would start out with a phylum, a genus, a species, and very specific after the species. So you have that whole classification. Now we identify most of these bacteria by 2 names. One is the genus and the other is the species. Like for example, C. diff. That is Clostridia differentius. So Clostridia is the genus and the diff is the species. So E. coli. E standing for enterococcal. So, and E. coli and E. coli. So that's the way we generally talk about the microorganisms when we're identifying them. So that's some of the classifications that are out there. Now, the bacteria can be a number of different functions. First of all, they can be commensal. They can live in your body. They don't do anything to help or hurt your body. And on the other hand, you do nothing to help or hurt them. Okay, those are commensals. They can also be, besides that, mutualistic. The mutualistic bacteria will not only live in your body, but they will help. They have certain things that they produce or certain things they do that help your body. Now, that doesn't mean that you can necessarily help them, although we certainly do things, maybe unconsciously, to help them as well, or hurt them as well. And so that's called mutualistic bacteria. So they actually help you, as opposed to commensal. Then there's pathologic bacteria. Pathologic has that implication. They're pathologic. They hurt you. So you don't want to have a lot of those. But we have all of these in our body: commensal, mutualistic, and pathologic. And they are in a balance. They're in a balance. Usually the good bacteria, which are the commensal or the mutualistic, they keep the pathologic bacteria in check. And so there's a good balance in the body. It's when it goes out of balance, an imbalance, that problems occur. So those are the different classifications that we use for the bacteria. Now we have more than just bacteria, and we also have viruses that live in our body. We have fungi that live in our body, protozoa that live in the body. In other words, you have a number of different microorganisms that function very quietly in the body, and they are in balance. They are in balance, which is the important thing. So let's go on. Let's talk a little bit about probiotics. Now, the probiotics actually were first identified way back in 1907 in the laboratory. And there's a number of them over the years now that have been identified. Thousands of different bacteria have been identified. And we are still almost on an annual basis learning what some of these bacteria have the ability to do to help you, all the mutualistic ones. And so as you learn, we try to use them, use the good attributes, use the good bacteria, and we put them into a capsule, and they are part of the the probiotic regimen. So at this point, let me give you the definitions now of probiotic. Probiotic is a product that contains defined, viable, good gut bacteria in sufficient numbers to alter that gut microbiome and exert a beneficial health effect. So there's a lot of components to that definition, obviously. So these are good bacteria, basically, or good fungi, because that's usually in the mix too. So those are probiotics. Prebiotics are the foods, the digestible food for those bacteria. That generally is soluble fiber. And you remember, we need fiber in our diets. We need actually 25 to 30 grams per day of fiber in our diet. And you can get preparations of pure fiber at the pharmacy. You can buy them over the counter. Fiber-containing capsules, fiber-containing gummies, whatever. But you need that fiber. And many of the prebiotics are in the preparations of the probiotics. And when they mix the two, they're called synbiotics, S-Y-N, not S-I-N. Don't get me into talking about venial and mortal symbiosis now. They are called synbiotics. And when things get out of whack and an imbalance, it's called a dysbiosis. So those are the definitions. Okay, once we have that, we can go on. I told you that they were first probiotics, or prebiotics, I should say. Probiotics were first identified back in 1912. And they've undergone a lot of improvement since that time. What are the usual bacteria that we see in a probiotic preparation that you buy at the pharmacy? Well, normally they have a lot of lactobacilli. Lactobacilli. That's the genus. Now, there are many, many different kinds of lactobacilli. And so you may get a number of them in an individual probiotic preparation. There are over 260 species of lactobacilli out there that we have in our body. So only a few of them have been really specifically identified to help certain problems, digestive problems that occur. And so those are the ones that are in the probiotic capsules. There's also a thing called Bifidobacteria because they have a little Y shape to it. So they called it Bifido, two stems basically. Bifidobacteria. Again, many, many in our body. Only specific ones that are identified as particular bacteria that help a particular dysbiosis in the body. Okay, those are the ones in the probiotics. You may also have an organism called Saccharomyces. Now, Saccharomyces is a fungus, but it helps diarrhea, especially infectious diarrhea. So that's why they put that in a lot of the preparations. You may have a bacteria called Streptococcus. Now, Streptococcus, as far as we know, like strep throat, is not a good thing. It's a pathologic bacteria. But there are some strep that are not pathologic because there are dozens of different strep species in your body. And so the Strep salvarius antagonizes the growth of, for example, a bad strep like a Strep pyogenes. Okay, so those are the different kinds that you see in a probiotic preparation. What are the indications for probiotics? Well, there are a number of at least documented indications. There are a lot of off-label uses of probiotics. In fact, a lot of people take them and they don't know why they take them in the first place. They all know, well, it's got to be good for my biome. Well, yeah, but do you need them? You know, that's the question. I always say never take any medication, I don't care what it is, unless you have a specific reason to take it. And so that's one of the points I want to make with this whole thing. So what are the actual indications for using these probiotics? Well, first of all, there are specific probiotics for women. In fact, one of the earliest indications was bacterial vaginosis, infections in the vagina. And so there was a specific species of lactobacillus that produces a material that would help to combat that. It also kills Candida. So, good stuff. That would be in the preparations that you see on the market, probiotics for women. But they're usually in the age range where they're still menstruating. So if I'm speaking to the elderly right now, you generally don't need to use that particular kind of lactobacillus in your probiotic. You also, besides the bacterial vaginosis, you can use it for infectious diarrhea. And in fact, that's where the Saccharomyces happens to help. That's where the Bifidobacteria happens to help. Now, the Bifidobacteria, that usually is one of the first probiotic type bacteria in your body. You usually develop them around between age 1 and 2. You may start having them right from the beginning if you have a vaginal delivery. So the Bifidobacteria have a particular substance that they generate that helps the baby, the infant, to digest milk. It breaks down the oligosaccharide in milk, which is why the 2-year-olds have a lot of Bifidobacteria in their gut. Big surprise, right? So, but do we need them at an older age? Well, maybe not that particular Bifidobacteria, but maybe a different species, okay? So that's the Bifidobacteria. The other thing, too, people use it for irritable bowel. We don't always know what irritable bowel really means. So it could be a dysbiosis, too. That's what the theory is, and that's why people sometimes will take it when they have alternating bouts of constipation and diarrhea. Some people use it for not just diarrhea, but some use it for constipation. And it may be that the fiber, the probiotic, the prebiotic that they're getting is the reason they're improving with that probiotic, prebiotic preparation. Okay, so irritable bowel. You can have problems with after you've had your colon removed, say for a cancer or ulcerative colitis or Crohn's disease, whatever. If you've had that and you have a pouch, there's an entity, an inflammation of that pouch that's called Touchitis. And that is an indication for probiotics as well. Obviously, a lot of people use it for antibiotic-related reasons, because the antibiotics nowadays are so potent, they can kill a lot of the bacteria in the gut. And then it's not in balance anymore. The pathologic may win out, and you may get post-antibiotic diarrhea. So we usually will give a probiotic along with the antibiotic to try to regroup and recolonize the bacteria in your gut. So those are the indications, not the off-label indications, the actual indications for use of probiotics. That doesn't mean that they're not effective for some off-label reasons. And we'll talk a little bit about that. There are some risks to taking it. You may get an allergic reaction, but usually the allergic reaction is to a particular filler or something that's in that preparation that's not the bacteria itself. You may get opportunistic infections if that pathologic bacteria has been fortified sometimes by the preparation. And so you can get that. You can get contaminants, obviously. In any preparation, you can get contaminants. And you have the introduction of new genes. Remember, all these bacteria all have their own genetic component. Now, do all of the genes and all of the bacteria that are in there, are all of them compatible with what your body is? Well, that's a question. Nobody has the answers to that yet. But that is a worry that people have about taking probiotics for a longer period of time. So, who regulates them? Who regulates these probiotics? Well, the FDA. I have no respect whatsoever for the FDA, although I do have to admit they have a lot of work ahead of them to do. They have to look at all these things, but they take the material that's given them from the pharmaceutical house about that particular product. And the product, as long as it says that it's not designed to treat a particular disease, whatever, that's okay. It's okay. And so most of these then are approved as a supplement, a food supplement in the stores. Okay. The label that you see on those probiotics have to have certain things. You want to make sure that that probiotic is a stable one for a shelf. In other words, you shouldn't have to keep them in the refrigerator. You shouldn't have to worry about constant changes in temperature. They're shelf stable. So you want to make sure that that preparation is shelf stable. They should be in a darker bottle. In other words, you don't want a lot of the ultraviolet lights getting to them, because that can alter a lot of the bacteria. You also want to make sure that they have a capsule around them that will protect them from the stomach acid. You want to make sure that capsule is able to traverse the stomach, get into the small intestine, where it then can dissolve and the bacteria can do some good. So All those three things need to be in that preparation. You want to make sure there's very minimal fillers or additives in there, because they can hurt the probiotic bacteria as well. Okay, and prebiotics should be added to most of them because they all need to have some food. We all need food, and the probiotics need food as well. Generally, they use some type of soluble fiber like inulin. Inulin is a plant fiber. It's a soluble fiber that's in the roots of a lot of the plants, like chicory has a lot of inulin in it, in their roots. So a lot of the antibiotics, or the probiotics, will use inulin as their prebiotic. Doesn't have to be. They can use any polysaccharide. They can use an oligopolysaccharide. They can use any of those that are soluble and that the bacteria can use in the body. Now, what do these bacteria do in there? Well, there are a number of good things that they do. Number one, we had mentioned that they defend against the pathogenic bacteria. So we want to keep that balance all the time. Number two, they do protect the body because of the mucosal barrier. There's a goblet cells, they call them, that are in the mucosa of the intestinal tract, and that secretes a little gel that's on the surface of the mucosa. And that helps for absorption or non-absorption. So they enhance those goblet cells, and they also enhance the lymphoid tissue that's in the wall of the small intestine. What else? These bacteria produce serotonin. It's estimated roughly 85% of all the serotonin in the body, which is the feel-good hormone, remember, 85% is produced by these bacteria in the gut. So that's another good thing that they do. What they do with the fiber now that they have is they create short-chain fatty acids by fermenting that fiber. So you said, gee, if they can ferment it, why can't we eat fermented foods? You can. That's a very natural way to enhance the bacteria in your gut. So things that are fermented, like sauerkraut, like kefir, like kimchi, there's a whole number, even wine, even beer. They're all fermented, and that ferment is the good thing in there. So all of these products, therefore, act a little bit like the bacteria in our gut. There's also some influence that the gut has on the brain. In fact, they've even defined a gut-brain axis where the bacteria have an influence on what happens in the brain tissue as well, because these things get absorbed and they do go all the way to the brain and have an influence on the nerve endings in the brain. Okay, so that basically is what we look for on the capsule. And now, with reference to these prebiotics now, I had mentioned inulin and other oligopolysaccharides, but they all have to be soluble fiber, basically. Number one, we want the prebiotic to be manufactured in a good manufacturing practice facility. So that's number one. Number two, minimize the additives because they do kill probiotics. Number three, it should be organic. All of these plant products should be grown organically, no pesticides in the preparation. You need to have these oligosaccharides, either fructo-oligosaccharide or galacto-oligosaccharide, because they do enhance the absorption of calcium, magnesium, and decrease the pH of the colon, which does help. They do, in fact, decrease a little bit the blood lipids as well. So those are the things that we look for in the prebiotics that we eat. Okay, given that, what can we do? What sort of foods can we eat that will help? I had mentioned that good fermented foods are good to eat. Other foods don't have to be fermented, like, for example, artichokes. Artichokes are very, very good for prebiotics. Bananas, polenta, broccoli, blueberries, and, of course, any of the fermented foods as well. So that is basically the types of things you can eat in your diet that will enhance the probiotics and act just like them, actually. We don't always help ourselves. We tend to kill off a lot of these gut flora, the gut bacteria, with what we do. Because number one, diet influences. Diet, in fact, is the number one influence on the number and the type of bacteria in our gut. So what happens if you use laxative on a chronic basis, and I'm talking years and years of using laxatives, that will have an effect on the gut bacteria, not always a good one. If you have diarrheal type chronic illnesses, chronic stress, the bowel prep that you go through before your colonoscopy, that wipes them all out. You're washing them all out. Now, there are some idiots who will be hawking these preparations that wash out the colon. Oh, wash all the toxins out. Yeah, you're washing the bacteria out as well, you idiot. You know, that's the thing that will hurt the microbiota in our gut. And so, under those circumstances, especially if you're going to do a bowel prep or you're going to do some, quote, toxic relief in your body, you probably should be taking a good probiotic, prebiotic preparation in addition to that to replenish the bacteria in your gut. Are there some good ones on the market? Yes. But you want to make sure, number one, that they have at least 40 billion colony-forming units in that preparation. So you look for that. Make sure they have a prebiotic in there, like inulin or one other oligopolysaccharide. So make sure that those things are there. Make sure that it is shelf stable. You don't have to put it in the refrigerator and all. Make sure all those things are available. Make sure that it is a good manufactured product from a reputable agent, and hopefully you can use them in the proper way. Very good. That's it for today. This is Dr. C. I hope you've learned a little bit about pre and probiotics and your gut microbiota. Have a good day.